let's talk a little bit about the law itself, about what you're challenging
Yeah.
here. Can you just give people a background on exactly how the handgun roster works in California and the key provisions that you guys challenged?
Yeah. So the California Unsafe Handgun Act, the UHA, is a regulatory scheme that's put in place that we can only buy handguns that at certain points in time had certain features or characteristics, were drop tested, safety tested, and added to an approved for sale list. So a long time ago, in the era of Generation 3 Glocks, that meant it just had to be drop tested and it got on the list, and they are grandfathered in. So they can still be sold today. In about 2011, I believe, the state required magazine disconnects, which is a function of the firearm where if the magazine is not in the gun, it will not fire the round in the chamber. It also required loaded chamber indicators. So when there's a round in the chamber, a little flag sticks up that says loaded when up, or with text says that it is loaded, and also has some sort of visual and physical indication that it's loaded.
Oh, it has to
and
have
then
text
also,
on it. It has to specifically
yeah, it
say
has
it?
to have. Because
That's
when I talk
interesting.
about loaded chamber indicators, people say, well, the Glock Gen 3 extractor sticks out so you can feel it and know that it's loaded.
Yeah.
It doesn't say loaded when up or loaded when protruding or something like that. It has to have the text.
It's much more
So it's
strict than you might, because loaded of the challenged features, loaded chamber indicators are pretty common. Magazine disconnects really don't exist anywhere outside of California.
No.
And then we'll get into the next one, but
high power. Yeah.
Yeah. But but loaded chamber indicators are pretty common these days. At the very least, you can,
to some extent,
you can see into the chamber, or there's some sort of something sticks up or something sticks out that lets you know that the gun is loaded. But it sounds, but yeah, that's interesting. So you actually have to have even more than just some kind of indicator. It has to be specifically written on the indicator that it's loaded.
Yeah, hopefully the person picking up the gun speaks English or can read English. And then in 2013, the laws changed to require what's called microstamping. And what microstamping was at the time is they wanted on 2 locations of a spent primer on a semi-auto handgun, in order to get added to the list of approved handguns, would have to put some sort of serial number or marking index that could be traced back to that specific gun. Recently, a couple of years ago, it was changed to only 1 location, which is technically more feasible because the firing pin could, in theory, work. The problem is this technology is hugely expensive, completely undesired by the market, and very impractical and borderline, I would say, personally, in my opinion, impossible to implement outside of a one-off instance. So that was in 2013. So from 2011 to 2013, a few handguns made it onto the roster, like the Shield, and that's really one of the only ones, maybe some car firearms that had the loaded chamber indicator and magazine disconnect. Since 2013, when microstamping became a thing, no handguns have been added to the roster. Now, for a frame of reference, I could not buy handguns till 2015. So every firearm that I have bought, every handgun that I have bought in the state of California has been, by definition, an unsafe handgun because they were grandfathered in. Now, our court case, Boland versus Bonta, Lance Boland being the main named plaintiff, we challenged with our MPI, motion for preliminary injunction, the loaded chamber indicator, the magazine disconnect, and the microstamping. We got that. Judge Carney issued a ruling that I thought was very fair, very specific, and we got everything we asked for, which was surprising. I was kind of tempering my expectations, didn't want to get too excited. I kind of hoped that we would get everything we asked for. But I was expecting bare minimum microstamping to get turned off, which would allow for a variety of firearms, like the Smith & Wesson M&Ps had some of that integrated into it. Some SIG firearms already had that technology in the past, but they stopped paying for the fees and drop testing and that kind of thing to keep it on the roster. But we got everything that we asked for.
Yeah.
But with a 14-day stay.
Right. Yeah. And we'll get into more details of the ruling in a moment, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the law itself and some of its effects, right? So one, you had no new models of pistols have been added to this list since 2013. Right? That was a big point. That was a big point of contention in the ruling from the judge.
Yep.
But also many have been removed in that period too, right?
Yeah. There have been challenges of this law in the past where I think it was quoted in the 1,500 range of different models, and that includes color variations.
Right.
But at that point, maybe 7-8 years ago, there were about 1,500. Now we have 832 on the roster. Mm-hmm. Only 32 of them, including color variations, have magazine disconnects and loaded chamber indicators. None of them have micro stamping. Right. So all of these semi-auto pistols on the roster are unsafe per the state's definition. And we have no new guns. I am buying Gen 3 Glocks.
It's the only thing keeping Gen 3 Glocks going is this law.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, and I believe Chuck Michelle, who's the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, said that there's only 200 distinct models on that list.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because, out of the thousands that exist.
If a gun has a different colorway, the Shield has, Smith & Wesson Shield 1.0 has about 6 or 7 different color models on it. And they're all the exact same gun, except one of them's OD green, one of them's blue, one of them's black, so there's very few semi-auto handguns available.
And they're pretty opaque about why they remove something from the list, right? I mean, I believe last year they removed the H&K USPs from the roster.
Yeah.
But they didn't say why.
Yeah, we can only speculate. I have some insider sources that seem to indicate that it was something to do with the sourcing of a small part or the manufacturing methods of something like a spring. And we've seen similar issues with the Smith & Wesson SD9VE. I think was something to do with the takedown magazine disconnect mechanism. They manufactured it in a slightly different way or sourced it from a different warehouse. And that was removed from the roster as well. But the DOJ did not come out and say why. It just, in the middle of the year, the H&Ks and that one model of Smith & Wesson just disappeared from the roster. And there was no press release from either H&K or the DOJ.